Hi everyone, it's Atalanta, and we're here for another episode of Everyday Witchcraft. Our guest tonight is Elsa Pendragon. She's a life coach, a Reiki master, and high priestess of Coven of the Sacred Trinity. So no further ado, let's introduce our guest. So we're here in another episode of Everyday Witchcraft, and we have Elsa Pendragon. So I'd like you to introduce yourself, please, and tell us a little bit about yourself.
My name is Elsa. People either call me Elsa or they call me Dawn. Um, yeah, I'm a high priestess of Coven of the Sacred Trinity. I am a member of the Middle Tennessee pagan community for well over 20 years. I do several other offices instead of just high priestess. I do Reiki, phone reading, tarot reading, life coach. I'm a notary. I'm AMM ordained, ULC ordained. I run a coven with two other people, and I have two dogs and a husband.
You're a busy lady.
No, I have a full-time job too, but
I would think the husband's a full-time job.
yeah, it happens.
Well, tonight we're here to talk about being a high priestess and what that entails, how you became one. So first of all, can you kind of talk about what exactly is a high priestess?
So a high priestess is someone that, so there's like so many levels to this. So I don't want to step on toes, but a high priestess is someone who takes on the responsibility of leading ritual, leading coven, and leading classes, and taking on a responsibility of educating those who ask of witchcraft. So being a priestess is what all of that is. Being a high priestess really is running and maintaining a coven, taking charge of classes, and really taking charge of ritual. That's what a high priestess kind of boils down to. So a high priestess to me is an embodiment of paying it forward. So everything that I've learned over the past 20 some odd years, I now take on the responsibility to pass that on for people who ask.
Basically, you're a healer, you're a teacher, you're a mother, you're a sister, you're kind of a little bit of everything. You're sort of like the goddess embodied into a human form.
Right.
So kind of, what about training? How do you become a high priestess?
You go through and you learn what witchcraft is, and then you go and you join a group or a coven. Hopefully you take on a role within that coven. I took on maiden in a coven I didn't run, but I belonged to. I learned from my high priestess how to be a high priestess, and then I took over a coven, started a coven, and that's the role that I kind of went through. So training is something that you kind of get on hand, or you're handed, or you're slapped, hand slapped. You did that wrong. Okay, don't do that again.
Don't do that again.
Yeah, no. So it's one of those, through life experiences, through going to gatherings, going to rituals, going to everything, you kind of life experience it. Recently, I've gone ahead and taken some counseling courses. I've taken some mental health courses. I think that it's important to receive some type of counseling training when you're a high priestess. You know, you become a bit of a counselor when you're a high priestess, because that's similar to the priest. People come to a church to go to a priest to give over their sins and you know, say, I did this, give me forgiveness. But in witchcraft, you don't have that. In paganism, you don't have that. You don't have somebody else saying, hey, you're forgiven, go, don't do it again, or I'll see you next Sunday. In witchcraft and in paganism, you go to the high priestess to do what's now today called shadow work. So you can go to a priest or priestess within any religion, really, and they're there to guide you, and they're there to help you. But at the end of the day, they're here to help you help yourself. So I've gone through all of this stuff so that I could help another person figure out how to get down that path that they're going down.
Now,
So I'm not gonna,
okay, so there's being a third degree priestess versus a high priestess. I'm not sure if your coven has the different degrees, the first, the second, the third, or how many degrees they have. I know that like with my coven, we have 3 degrees, and then you can become you can hive off and become a high priestess, of your own coven. So what exactly, as far as the roles within the coven, what is the difference between your highest degree and then you? What's the difference as far as responsibilities and things like that?
so we do have the first degree, second degree, third degree. We have it to where a first degree is a priest or priestess. A second degree is you can become a high priestess and hive off and do your own. And the third degree is you're still with the mother coven, still learning, still growing, and still getting advice. So I would say the difference between me is experience. Just to boil it down into life experience of I've done ritual so many times it's a cakewalk, but someone who's first coming in has never done ritual or may have done ritual but not confident in it. And so that's the difference between, I would say, our students that are freshly coming in and me is experience and confidence. So if I flub up, I'm like, okay, let's keep going. But if you have a new person that comes in and they flub up, they're like, oh my God, we got to stop. I got to start this over again. So it's a self-esteem as well. So, and that's some of the things that we build up along the degree system is not just the witchcraft level, it's self-esteem, it's all the other stuff. And then, so my training has helped me. My teachers has also helped me. So I've had several teachers and each one has taught me in their own particular way, through their own example, through our life mistakes, through trials and tribulation. That's it. It's the experience at the end of the day. It's just experience. Because someone can go to Facebook, start a group on Facebook and go, I'm the high priestess of a coven. Is it wrong? Absolutely not. It's experience. Would you be a little leery of somebody who's never done anything and all of a sudden they're the high priestess? I would. But it would also be my partial responsibility to reach out and go, hey, if you need anything, let me know.
Question here. What if someone joins your coven who has been a high priestess or went through the degree system? Do you recognize that when they come in? Obviously, they can't be a high priestess of the coven, but do you recognize them as going through the degree system, or do they have to kind of start over? How does that work?
We recognize what they've gone through. Of course, we'll do a Q&A session with them to see what level of experience they've gone through. It is one of those things that our coven has a theory or a mantra that we don't want to hear what you read and we don't want to hear who you know. We're really into what you can do. That's the big thing. And so if you come in and you show us, hey, I'm a third degree and I do this, this, and this, and you're doing ritual just like the best of them, guess what? You're a high priestess. The difference between saying you're a high priestess and high priestess of the coven is the last word. To be honest, I'm me and 2 other people are in charge of this coven. I'm the high priestess. I have a deputy high priestess, and then I have a priest. And so the 3 of us run this coven together. So I'm not the only one making decisions, and neither are the other 2. If a decision needs to be made, it's, hey guys, we need to get together and have this conversation. So as a deputy high priestess of the coven, right? So once a second degree is hit, you're a high priestess. So the high priestess thing, the difference is the word coven, because not all high priestesses are high priestesses of a coven. They're a high priestess, plain and simple. They could be a solitary high priestess. So not every priestess will be a part of a coven. Not every high priestess will have the degree system. I know in some crafts out there, like the Appalachian witchcraft, and then voodoo and hoodoo, they're called high priestesses as well. And they don't necessarily have the degree system like British traditional witchcraft has. So that's what my tradition is British traditional witchcraft. I spent the first portion of my training as a Wiccan. So I became a Wiccan high priestess. And eventually I got to put of the coven at the end of my name. So that's, I think, is that what you was asking?
Yeah, I mean, you actually answered another question of mine too, because I was wondering if like a solitary witch could be a high priestess, and that makes a lot of sense. So within your coven, you actually have multiple high priestesses, if I can say that properly. So there's not just one then. I always thought that you had just one and then the rest for like a third degree. But you have multiple then that run your coven, is that correct? And then you're kind of like at the top. And then you have, okay, so I think I understand that correctly then. And then you have the high priest. So is there one person that's kind of that makes the final decision, or do you make them all together?
um I think we make them all together. And that's the reason why we did 3 people. I believe in the 3 tier. Sacred Trinity is the name of our coven. So why would we not have 3 people in charge of the coven? And the reason why there's no um, opposition voting. So if you have just the high priestess and she's running the whole show, you can run into the I've said so. This is the way we're going to do it. And then you have a high priest and a high priestess, and they try to work together, and then they disagree on something. So now you're at a standstill on agreeing or disagreeing on something. And so if the one says this is the way it needs to be, and the other one goes no, no, it's not, then you're stuck. So when you bring that third element in, it's really intriguing bringing that third person in, because it's either they're going to agree with one side or the other, or they're going to bring a whole new idea to the concept of what the argument is about or the division is about. So that's kind of why we have the 3.
That makes sense. Yeah, it kind of makes it a full circle, and that makes a lot of sense. So during ritual, how do you divide out the responsibilities? What are the different roles that everybody plays during ritual?
So I'm going to give you a standard, and then I'm going to tell you what our coven does. So the standard is usually you have the high priest and priestess, which is the embodiment of the god and the goddess. And then you have what's known as your quarter callers, and that's earth, air, fire, water, and spirit. So you may have the high priest and priestess call them, or then they delegate to the first degrees or the second degrees to call that. And then you can go further down. You've got the fire tender, and you've got, all these other little roles that are going on as well. But those tend to be the big ones: the high priest and the priestess, and the quarter callers, the fire tender, and then the maiden and the summoner. So the maiden and the summoner usually are first degrees and second degrees. The quarter callers are your neophytes or your first degrees, or whoever is. So, okay, so let me back that up a little bit. So our tradition is somebody within the group decides to do ritual. So let's say it's Beltane, and we schedule. I've already made my schedule for next year. I already know who's doing rituals for next year. So we don't do all the rituals. Like I as high priestess don't do all the rituals. I used to. I got better. No. So it gives them the opportunity to bring their tradition, their thought process into that ritual. So they run the ritual. They're the high priestess at that ritual, regardless of what their rank is, regardless of what their time is. They have us to assist them with anything they have to do. So we don't go, here, do it, now go burn in that fire pit and good luck with that, because we're not going to help you. That's not what we do. This is a learning process. And so the best way to learn to get the self-esteem and do this is to do it. And so that's what we do. And so we promote them to choose a ritual to do. We advise them how to do it. On my coven classes, I do ritual building classes. And then we go, who do you want to do what? Do you want to do everything? We advise you not to do that. Or do you want or do you want other people to help you? Oh, and by the way, you're not restricted to coven, because we open our Sabbats to community. And so we go, if you have someone you've worked with prior to coven or after coven that you want to call in air, ask them to call in air. Everything we do, we have one absolute requirement, and that you do it from your heart. That's the requirement. So we'll give you as much foundation training as we can give you, and then we go, okay, now you do it.
Now you get to do it. So you actually let them, you have an acting high priestess then, is that correct? For the different rituals? Is that what you're saying? That makes sense.
Acting high priestess, acting high priest. Yeah, absolutely. If you want to run a coven, I advise you to join a coven, right? It's the best way to learn because there's plenty of books. Elaine McCoy has a book on running a coven. There's several books out there on running a coven. So you have the knowledge, but the experience is really where it takes effect because you can see the ins and outs of running a coven. You know, one of the biggest things you'll hear a priest or priestess say that are in the high priestess position is, we heard cats. And if you've ever heard cats, they do what they want. So you need to learn that skill set of control of the crowd control. That's one of the lessons that I give is not only how to cast circle, but how to do a personal ritual or a coven ritual, but I also teach a class on how to do a large gathering ritual. And all of them is crowd control. Absolutely crowd control all elements because hello, the gods and goddesses have a sense of humor and they are going to muck it up as much as they can. But the thing is that if you've been there and done that, bought the coffee cup and broke it, you're ready to run your own thing. But is it required? No. It just highly suggested. Counseling classes, first aid, mental first aid courses.
Concerned because I have run into some that it's kind of like it's their way or no way at all. You know, yeah, it's just it's their law or it's nothing at all. I've actually been a member of a coven that was that way, which is why I left that coven. So it just, you know, it's nice to hear somebody who is in your position be humble, you know, and, you know, just accept the fact that, hey, I'm a human being and this is a way of doing things. This isn't the only way of doing things, but with your experience, you know, it's a good way of doing things and you know it works. And so they need to take that into consideration, you know. So yeah, I think you've probably run into that too. There's a lot of hierarchy when it comes to people in positions and stuff like that.
I'll have to admit I was that at one time. And it was a learning lesson for me. I can give you some insight why it happens. I broke my own shell when I figured out what I was doing. And divorce happened at that time too, so kind of things went hinky. But when you start a coven and you run a coven and you're the only one making decisions, and then you go to your folks and go, hey, can you help me with this? And everybody's like, I'm too busy. And then you start teaching classes and creating classes, and then you teach a class and they're like, that's not the way it is. And it's like, well, why don't you teach the next class? That way you can use your view. And they go, I don't have time for that. So now all of a sudden you're the only one doing the work. You're the only one doing this and the only one. And that's how you feel at some point in time is I'm the only one doing this until you learn how to delegate. And the other thing is that you have to have some pretty big backbones when you're a priestess or a high priestess, especially when you're running a coven. The thing is that it's not easy to do by far, but it's the best thing I've ever done. I am so appreciative of being allowed to have this life experience, this go around, because it's very humbling, but you can get lost in the power of what it is. And so when you find somebody that's lost in that power, yeah, you tend to go, I'll come back in a couple of years. See you later.
See where you're at.
Hopefully
yeah.
they'll get it. Yeah, hopefully they'll get it. But yeah, and that's the hard part, but the most rewarding. Participate, which you're here to eat the food. We need to have a talk. And that's when you said mother, maiden, crone, warriors in there too. Because we got to stand up to some people and go, That's not gonna work. And that's the backbone I'm talking about, is that you got to have the backbone, not as a high priestess within your own members, but plenty of high priestesses has started witch wars. And so I tell people, if you want to do this, it is a calling, but the first thing that gets put on your back is a big old target, because your members, if they mess up somewhere else, they're not necessarily told they messed up. You get the phone call and say, hey, one of your people did this and I didn't appreciate it. And you're like,
You're responsible. You're the one that, you're the one that catches the bug. I know, you're the one that represents everybody. So, and of course they represent you as well, but you're the one that they come to. So you mentioned something about like the your coven stepping up and having responsibility and being a part of everything. I know with my coven, I have them teach classes. I have everybody, even the first degrees or the dedicates, that haven't even got their first degree yet. Everybody can bring something to the table. Everybody steps up. And let's kind of talk about that a little bit, as far as like within your coven, if you're able to talk about that, the structure. Do you have people that do that step up and actually like the lower degrees, like the first degrees, the second degrees? Was I correct in hearing that you have them step up and teach some of the classes and stuff, take on the responsibility?
Absolutely, they need to, because okay, so this is my corporate witch coming out. I have a work for the circle class that I do. The majority of the people go through this circle class. It's a year class, so it's 12 months, and then, but that's their basics of witchcraft. And so when they've gone through that course and they join the coven, then they should be able to teach a class from that book, right? So they've gone through it and they experienced it, and now they're in coven and they're doing it. So now it's time for you to do it. The other side of this is one of the people in my coven is a rock hound. She is amazing with rocks and crystals and stones, and oh my gosh, why would I not have her teach a class? I don't have that knowledge. Why would I not have her teach a class? We had one of the members teach a clay class, and then one of our people, and myself included, kind of took off with these clay creatures that we were taught to do. They did a what's the name of it called? The dream catcher class, where they taught everybody how to make a dream catcher. I'll admit I threw mine across the room because I couldn't do it. But guess what? I couldn't do it. So I got somebody else who could to teach the class. I am not the end-all fountain of knowledge. And so when you start getting all these people there, you start looking at their skill set and you're like, oh, I don't have that. Why don't you teach that? And then so it's a requirement for the first degree that you teach a class and you do a full moon ritual, right? So you do one full moon ritual. I've been making them do Sabbaths, but that's kind of a second degree thing, but okay. And teach a class, right? So the other things is like inventory of yourself and other things, but there's classes that help build up to being able to do these things. I was trying to sneak a peek to see if I have my other corporate witch thing.
Here's a corporate witch thing. I like that, the corporate witch. I'm gonna start referring to you as that.
Okay. But I actually have written down what's required of my first degrees and my second degrees. I will admit we are still kind of a youthful coven. We've only been around since 2015. So we've got a few first degrees, some neophytes, some that have left the coven. We have people who are about to be elevated to levels, and then the 3 head are third degrees in the tradition. But like our high priest has been British traditional witchcraft since the beginning of his tradition, and he's 71 old, and so he's got history on him. I have Wicca. I started in Wicca, and I'm in British traditional witchcraft now. And then the other high priestess, eclectic Wiccan, training in other areas of like Alexandrian and Gardnerian, and now she's British traditional witchcraft. So we come from different backgrounds, and that to me should say a lot about us, is that we are not closed-minded. We are not the one way, like I've already said that before, but it's part of the training, is you learn how to say, look, I'm not the, I can't cuss on here.
I was gonna say, I
the
think
head
you
poop.
can, but I don't really know for sure. So.
I'm not the head poop around here. So uh, even though I have the title, come on, it's not, it's about the coven. It's more about the coven than it is about my own personal goals and what I want. You know, it's what does the coven want, and does everybody also want to have that as well? So it's not, I'm not a dictator.
Now,
I
okay,
would
you
love,
mentioned that you were ordained. Do you have to be ordained to be a high priestess of a coven?
no,
Okay. What about yours in particular? Do you have to for yours? I know with mine you don't have to be, but with yours, do you have to be?
we ask that our
Okay.
members become ordained in either ULC or AMM. Um, I went to the ULC to get the piece of paper that says high priestess. And then somebody asked me if I could marry people, and I was like, oh, okay, we'll get ordained officially. And then Tennessee had that scare where online ministers were not going to be able to do weddings anymore. And then American Marriage Ministries came down and did a live in-person ordination in Nashville. So we went to that so that we could say, no, 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 we're online, but we also had a live ordination. So, and then I even did a special kick, and I became a notary, because in the state of Tennessee, notaries can marry people. So
Notaries can marry people.
yes.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
How do you have people join your coven? Like, how do you find them? Do they come to you? I know with my coven, we have a trial period of about 90 days where they come to a couple of meetings, a couple of classes. If we have a Sabbath ritual, they're invited to that to see if they're a good fit on both ends, on both parts. Is there a certain system that you have? Like, is there a trial period when somebody wants to join yours?
A trial period per se is probably 6 months. We have the circle class, and when somebody comes to the circle class, we tell them getting into the circle class is not the how do I say this? Does not guarantee that you're going to get into coven, right? But coming to circle class is the only way you can get into coven. Okay, unless you've got the other degrees and everything, that's another segment. So we post on several groups about November, December, that we're going to start accepting applicants for the circle class. I got 23 people right now listed, but and so you go through the first 6 months of this class. Now it's a 12-month series of classes. It's 13 classes. So around the 6th month, we start going, hey, are y'all interested in joining coven? Or they'll come to us and say, hey, we want to join coven. And that's when they have to start going to Sabbaths or any other open events that we go to. So like we go to karaoke or whatever it is we feel like doing, going to the park. Some of us go on outings for rock hunting. Not all of us, but some of us. So we need that person who is wanting to join coven to already be in circle class, because I teach the circle class. The high priest attends the circle classes and teaches. He interjects his information into it, and then the deputy high priestess teaches classes as well. Sometimes we grab some of our first degrees or about to become a first degree and teach a class. But anyways, you got to know the coven members, and the only way to do that is to come to Sabbaths. Also, that lets our coven members know that person. So they have my opinion as an opinion, but they want to meet these people that are coming to the circle class. So sometimes you'll find our coven members coming to circle class, and then, which is a good thing. And so they get to know each other. We get to know them. They get to know us. And if we all feel like we mesh, then we do what's called a voting system. Ours is a little unique on how we do our voting systems. We learn the hard way. So we do white stones and black stones. And then when it's time to vote somebody in, you pass a bag around. And if everybody gets a white stone, you're in. And if you get all black stones, you're not in. And if you get all white, but one black, you're not in. And then that takes out the, I didn't really like them. No, Coven voted, and this is how they voted. No reasons, no rhymes. This is how they voted. Yeah, we
So
learned that one the
everybody,
hard way.
everybody has to agree. Everybody has to be on the same page.
Yes, absolutely.
That makes
We
sense.
don't want dissension in our group. We all want harmony and we all want to get along. And
When there is conflict, does it fall on you to settle everything, or how does that work? Are you the one that everybody comes to quietly, silently? You have to kind of be the judge and jury there, or how does that work? How does problem solving happen amongst members if there's something serious that's going on?
so I have a deputy high priestess, and she's called a deputy for a reason. So a lot of conflict is brought to me, but a lot of conflict is brought to her. She has actual experience. She was a deputy at one time. She is a nurse. She has the experience to deal with that. Where I make mistakes, and I can admit to that. So it gets brought to her, and then she comes to me and the high priest, and we discuss it. And then if one of us was in the wrong, we get brought up to it. So nobody's held back. So if we've spoken to someone out of place or out of vengeance, or we've done something, or we just was ugly, our deputy high priestess will call you out, and she does it very well. So so that's kind of the dynamics we have within our group. But the majority of the time, the high priestess is the one that people come to and say, hey, Billy said Bobby did this to Angel and it was not fair and you need to take care of it, type of situation or something like that. And then you just work through it. You do, I call it the triangle. There's that person's truth, that's their person's truth, but then you have the truth. And
Right.
no one has the fly on the wall truth. So you've got to take the two together and then figure it out. So having that concept has helped me through the years, but we're not perfect.
What about going to events? What are your, as a high priestess of the coven, what are your responsibilities when you go to events? Do you partake in certain rituals? Does it depend on the event? How does that work?
So at a standard event, we all as a coven have gotten together and said, hey, we want to go to this coven. That's when I represent, and that's when the high priest represents. And then we represent the coven as a whole, and then everybody else represents the coven as a whole too. But with gathering situations, in my experience through the years, it's your mom and daddy, and your kids are being ugly over there, so you need to go take care of them, kind of situation. But it's one of those, I love gatherings because it doesn't, for me, it's one of those, hey, our coven is going to this gathering. Circle class or people, because we have Friends of the Coven of the Sacred Trinity group as well. And we go, hey, there's this gathering. And then sometimes people who have never gone to a gathering, never had experience or anything, wants to go with us, so that they're kind of under our umbrella, so that they've got protection per se while they're at a gathering. And then they've got somebody they can go to when they have questions, opposed to going to a gathering all by yourself, where you're like, I don't know anybody, I don't know who to talk to. So having that newbie that's never experienced it go with a group and have that experience with the group is beautiful, because that's how I started. The Serpent Stone and Dragon Hills, if anybody knows that's watching, might ring a bell. That was my first gathering experience, and I loved it. I went with a certain coven. I've gone with several covens, and then being a new person, it was awkward because you didn't know anybody, but everybody was so loving and caring, and just, you were like, wow, was this like in the hippie days? But but it was one of those, it was great. But if you messed up, you got called out. And if you didn't have somebody umbrellaed over you, you got called out. And it was just you. You had to deal with it. It's like, oh crap. And then you might find yourself in front of like the whole council of the gathering. And why did you do this? And with the umbrella, if you muck up, then they go, who are you here with? And then they come and get who you're here with, and then y'all go out and have a conversation of how do you supposed to act when you're at a gathering. So that's the difference for me in my experience on being a newbie and going to a gathering, being a high priestess and going to a gathering, and then being a coven member going to a gathering. It's one of those, it's kind of awesome going to the coven, because as a high priestess, it's like, I got to set my camp up. I might do some rituals and we might do this, but then I can delegate. Hey, you go get ice and you go get food and you go get so it's kind of nice, because you, as a high priestess, when you're at a gathering, back in the day, they called it holding court. And it's people go, oh, you're a high priestess, I want to ask you questions. And you're like, yeah, sure, come over, let's talk. And then all of a sudden you're looking at 15 people and now you're having a session. So they're now called workshops because we got smart. And instead of these random things, but it was a great experience. It was a great experience in all levels that I went through, from newbie to high priestess, going to gatherings. I think it's a beautiful place to take people.
What about when you are at a gathering, you're high priestess of the coven, and then you have other that are high priestess of their coven, who, I don't want to say authority, but it's kind of like who is the authority there? How does that work? Like whenever they have ritual and different events like that, who's in charge? Do they come together?
No, it's the gathering coordinators. Now, if the gathering coordinators are high priests and priestesses, then they have the ability to say, hey, I need all people who are high priests and priestesses, come, let's have a conversation. Or the gathering coordinator comes out and says, hey, heard you do ritual, would you do a ritual for us? So it all goes to the gathering coordinator. So
and you're there to represent your coven, and you've got to keep in mind that you are that teacher, you are that mother figure, you are that counselor, that healer, you have all those responsibilities. And so you have to take it upon yourself to be all of those things, and to respect the other people there that are taking that same role. Everybody has that same role and should be working together.
Yeah. I was just saying, it's kind of funny because you walk around and you're like, oh, I'm just going to act like a nobody. And then somebody's like, oh, you're Elsa. And it's like, shit. Yeah. But, or somebody says, hey, I'm a high priestess too. And then as a high priestess, I get to go, I have a question. I don't really have a lot of people to be able to ask. It's a high priestess questions. Do you have a few minutes? So it's you get an HPS and an HPS together that's asking questions you just can't ask other people within your coven or anything. So it also gives us an opportunity to learn from each other as well. Classes themselves. One of the things that we do in our coven is we invite other people, other covens, other teachers to come and teach a class to our members. We had an Asatru group come out and teach a class and do a ritual with us. We had I think Mary Hawk came to us one time and taught us about prison ministries. She talked to us a little bit about that and let us ask questions. And then we had other people. We had a hoodoo priestess come out and talk to our group. You're supposed to come out and talk to our group about bones. So
well, now that the schedule has slowed down, I can actually make that trip out there. So as of November, things have slowed down. So
each other. And I agree, we should have a high priest or priestess group meeting place that we can get together safely and be like, whew, this job, it's called a high priestess. It's tough, but it's rewarding. So as hard of the work that you put in, it's rewarding to see the results when you have that person who came in as, I'm interested in paganism, and then 2 years later they're doing their own ritual at a gathering, and you're like, and people are like, wow, she's really good, she must have been doing this for years, and you're like, yes, she has. Because in the back of your head you're like, yeah, I hope that.
You can watch them
You
grow.
know? Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's what's
it's like a
amazing.
light bulb moment.
Hmm. Yeah, that's what's amazing. And it's so interesting to get other perspectives and other ideas, is like, like what your coven is like and the way it's run. Because I'll be honest with you, I haven't really heard of many covens that have had uh, many like third degree priestesses, and let alone a high priestess within the coven, in addition to another high priestess. I have never heard that before. I didn't even know that existed. I always just have heard of the high priestess, that's it, and then the rest were like third degrees up underneath her. So that's really interesting, and that's an interesting take on the structure of a coven. So I
Yeah,
was
we
going to
don't
ask
have
you that too.
ego.
We have dedicates that don't go through. Well, everybody starts off as a dedicate, and then they become an initiate if they so choose, which means they're going to work through the degree system. But you can just remain a dedicate, or you can even be an initiate and decide, okay, I've got my first degree, but I think I'm just gonna be a dedicate. I'm sorry, and not go through the rest of the degrees right now, because life happens and you get caught up and whatnot. But they just kind of are members. They don't necessarily want to go through the education or anything like that. So you have that as well then with your coven?
So we have the circle class, they're neophytes. I guess you would consider them dedicants. And then we have the neophytes, those are the ones that join the coven, and then first degree, second degree, and third degree. The thing is that you get your degree when you've gone through the system. And that means if you take 6 years to get your first degree, okay. If you take another 6 years to get to your second degree, okay. Because we're not here to go, okay, year and a day, let's get this done. You only got a year and a day to do this. So it's one of those, when they come to us and say, hey, I would like to get my first degree, I get to go, okay, let's go down the list, make sure you've done everything that's on our first degree requirement. And then we hand them the assignment. And it might take 6 months to do an assignment, or it might take 2 years to do an assignment. It's up to the person that's doing it. There's no time frame. No, that's a killer. That's from my Wiccan past. Is, okay, year and a day, year and a day, year and a day. And it's like, no, it's too fast. It's too fast for me. Let me put it
Yeah.
that way. And so, what do you learn? What do you experience? What do you do? And do you have the time to commit to do a year and a day?
Yeah, we don't
Because
have we call it a year and a day, but it's kind of like your own time frame. I mean, you're not on a clock. Well, it's 1 year and 1 day. It's just kind of whatever happens. So it's the same thing with us too.
cool.
Well, I hate to say this, but we're actually out of time. Is there anything that you want to share with the audience, as far as like, we kind of explored a little bit of everything tonight, jumping into coven stuff too, which was kind of cool and interesting. But is there anything you want to share with anyone as far as being a high priestess? If that's what their goal is, if that's what they want to do, what is the most important thing that you think that they should know?
It's not glamorous. It can be, don't get me wrong, but if you're getting into it for the glamour, you're gonna burn. You're gonna burn. So it's hard. It's hard work, but so is paganism. Getting into paganism is probably the hardest thing you'll ever do. Being a high priestess kicks it up a few notches, but it's rewarding. It's the you get to see people grow because you're doing it, because nobody is stepping up to do it, so you're doing it, and then you get to see people grow from it. And so it's hard work, it's long work, it's time consuming, but it's so worth it. If you've got the ability to do it and teach and love it and just honor it, do it.
Just do it.
Just do it.
Well, thank you so much for coming on here. And I'm going to have you on again because I've got a couple more topics that I know that you will be perfect for with your expertise. So,
Yay.
thank you. I appreciate you coming on and
Thank you
blessed
for
be.
inviting me.
So right here is basically the beginner's crystals, I guess you could say. Honestly, there's so many crystals out there, so really go for what calls to you the most. But these are mainly like beginner, like what a lot of people are just so familiar with. So we're just gonna go down the list and show you guys some of the properties of what it can do, what you can use them for. So down here we're gonna start with carnelian. I love carnelian. It's fiery. I love it. It's also known as a stone of motivation. It's good for leadership, courage, strength. It helps with positive life choices. It's also a good stone for focusing. A lot of students, kids love to use them too because they make really good worry stones too. So especially like if you have a test coming up and you need to study for it, a lot of people will actually, while they're studying, hold on to the carnelian, and then they'll hold on to the carnelian during the test, so it kind of helps them, focus their intentions on what they're doing to get that A+. So carnelians are really good go-to, especially for young ones. The next one is my all-time favorite because it's clear quartz and it looks like ice. I love it. So clear quartz right here. This is basically like the universal stone. This is really good for substitutes, so you can actually use this stone for any other replacement if you have a stone that you don't have for like spell work or spell jars. It's also known as the Master Healing Stone, and it's also a good energy amplifier as well. So I absolutely love carnelian. I put a piece in literally everything I make, like between my herb bags and the spell jars to crystal grids. Clear quartz is always on it for me. My Another favorite of mine is the amethyst. It's so pretty. It's a purple. I love it. It's a good calming stone. It's also good for healing. It's also good for helping protect against like psychic attacks. Basically anything negatively coming to you mentally, it's really good for that. So, and also a lot of people like to keep amethyst on their nightstands to help them sleep too. It's a really good stone for calming the nerves, calming the mind, calming the stress and depression. But my number one go-to for depression anxiety would have to be tiger's eye. Tiger's eye is gorgeous. It comes in red, blue, gold. So the tiger's eye is good for taking action. It's also good for helping you keep a level head during chaotic situations. It's good for willpower. It's basically like the eye of the tiger. So tiger's eye is a really good stone for whenever you have a lot of chaotic situations, a lot of chaotic negativity. If you have a negative workplace, a lot of people like to keep a piece. I know I have actually a couple of nurses that work in a hospital, and they keep a piece of tiger's eye on them. So tiger's eye is really good, especially if you have a lot of chaotic energy, especially if you work in it, because you don't want to take it at home. The next one I like is rose quartz. Rose quartz is also a very good one for beginners. It's literally all matters of the heart. So it's good for the heart chakra. If you have a heartbreak, grief, just overcoming anything that has any matters of the heart. So rose quartz is really good, and it's also really pretty. It's pink. So another one that's good, especially for people who want to work with for abundance or prosperity in their life, citrine is the number one go-to. I know there is some people that do complain about how there's fake citrine out there. It's still citrine. It's just heated up amethyst. That's what citrine is even in nature. It's just heated up by the mantle instead of a kiln. So it still gets to the same temperatures and it still turns into citrine. It's good for pursuing your goals. It's good for prosperity, abundance, attracting wealth. People like to keep a piece in their wallet or their purse. So citrine is really your number one go-to for bringing that money in. So the next one for this one is jasper. Jasper is literally like the jockey of crystals. It's good for endurance, stamina, basically making you face your goals, like face what you need to overcome to get what you're wanting. So it's good for also the sacral and the root chakra. So a lot of people like to use the jasper for the the grounding and keeping you focused on what you need to do, centering yourself. So these are the number ones that are really good for beginners, especially people starting out. So definitely check out your local metaphysical shops and see what they have in stock, because there's so many different crystals out there. I can't keep up. There's so many, but they all have their own different properties and everything else too. So, and when it comes to the crystals, they all have different properties. So you just use what you need to use for what you're wanting to manifest. So you can keep them in your pocket, keep them in your purse, keep them at your job. You know, if you are feeling stressed, keep some amethyst on your desk. If you're going through a heartbreak, you know, rose quartz, keep a piece of rose quartz to help you get through the heartbreak and move on with your life. So there's different things that you can do. So do what calls to you.
Okay, Julie, what is advice that you would give to a new seeker? I'm sure a lot of new people come in your store. So.
Yes. My first piece of advice is please stay off of TikTok. TikTok is for entertainment purposes only. Yes, there's some good information on there, but it's literally like 1 to 100. So please be careful of where you're getting your information from. Another thing I tell my customers too is always cross-reference, because Billy Joe Bob can pay $12 for a website domain and then talk about how pigs fly, and then 500 people are like, oh my god, did you hear pigs fly? So make sure you cross-reference. You know, there is some logic to some of this stuff. No, we can't levitate. No, you know, we can't fly on brooms. I wish. I would save a lot of money on gas. But you know, another thing too is there's so many branches to, you know, spirituality and stuff. So you want to go with what calls to you. You know, you got to look at your energy. Your energy is like a paycheck. You know, you work hard for that money. You're not going to go spend, you know, $600 on golf clubs if you don't play golf. You know, you're not going to go drive down the freeway, you know, making it rain. So why do that with your energy? So when it comes to looking at all these different categories and, you know, information, go with what calls to you the most. That's what you want to spend your money on. That's what you want to spend your energy on. So, you know, is it astrology? Is it divination? Is it crystals? Is it herbs, candles? There's so many different things you can do. So focus on what calls to you. Don't waste your energy on, you know, astrology if you're more into crystals, you know, and vice versa. And just because your friend's doing it doesn't mean you have to do it too. Yeah, you can listen in and see what they're doing, but just because they're doing it doesn't mean you have to do it too. You know, everybody has a different path. Don't compare yourselves. Some people will advance faster than others. That's okay. Alrighty, so these are actually some of the books that I wrote myself. I'm actually working on 6 and 7 now. But the first one is my book of herbs. It took me 2 years to write this one. So basically I made it to where, like, about a couple years back, I was looking for the magical purposes of herbs, not the medicinal. Everything was medicinal, so I was like, we need a magical herb book, so that's what I did. So I simplified as much as I could when it comes to any of my books. I try to basically, I talk to you like you're Tarzan. I try to make it to where it's so simple and easy to follow. So it's got the elements, the planets, the energies, and then it tells you like what kind of spell work you can use the herb for. So there's that one. And then another popular one is the Book of Spell Jars. There were so many people that were doing spell jars, and customers were asking me for recipes, so I was like, all right, I can do that. So there's over 52 spell jars in here, and so I have a list of like what herbs you can use and then what stones you can use. Now, mind you, in the beginning of the book, I also explain, just because you see it on the list doesn't mean, you know, you have to put it in there. You know, you want to use what calls to you. That's your spell jar. You put in it what is set for your intentions. So the spell jar book is really good. This one too, I recommend this one always to especially my new beginners. Protection and cleansings. This is the number one thing that you guys need to learn about, especially starting out, because, you know, when you're working with different energies, you need to be able to protect yourself, shield yourself, cleanse yourself, ground yourself, including your loved ones and your home too. So this is actually a really good one, especially if you're starting out and you're just trying to figure out what protection really is. So that's a good one. The Craft for Beginners. So this is literally like the basics for witchcraft. I try to get not do too many foofy in my writing, so it's actually more simplified and everything. Tells you about candles, tells you about crystals, how to cleanse, things like that. So this is a really good book for beginners as well. And then the last book I've published is my book of teas. Not only can there's so many different types of spell work you can do. You can do candles, you can do baths, you can do teas. There's so many different things that you can use. So the book of teas, so this is spell work that you can drink. So there's 40 spells in here. So I even have ones for zodiac signs too. There's ones for the chakras. So that's a really good book too. And all these are found on Amazon. Hey guys, my name is Julie McMahon. I'm the owner of Practical Magic AL in Decatur, Alabama. We are located in the Decatur Shopping Center, so if you're ever in our area, come see us.